Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that's probably a little closer to home for a lot of you folks out there. We're going to be talking about .NET
Oh.
and specifically NuGet Package security.
Oh, yeah.
Something that, I think we all use NuGet packages all the time, but maybe don't always think about all the implications of what we're doing
Yeah.
when we just install these things willy-nilly.
Yeah.
You know?
It's one of those things that, you don't really think about until something goes wrong.
Right. And then you're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
What have I done?
Yeah.
So before we even get into all the different vectors for attacks and all that stuff, I think it would be helpful to take a step back and just think about what are NuGet packages even capable of? What kind of access do they really have to our systems?
Yeah, they actually have a surprising amount of access. They can do a number of things. One way they can interact with your system is through MS build files. And these are often bundled in packages, and you'll import them automatically when you build your project.
Uh-huh.
So these MS build files can actually manipulate how your entire application is built.
Oh, wow.
So they can execute commands. They can even modify your code before it's even compiled.
Wait, so they can change my code before you even see it in the compiler?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's just one way. Another way is through what are called Roslyn analyzers and source generators.
Okay.
These are pieces of code that run during both design time in Visual Studio or whatever IDE you're using, and also at build time.
Uh-huh.
And they analyze your code. They can even generate extra code for you.
Wow.
The problem with these is that they operate within the compiler process itself.
Oh.
There's virtually no sandbox to contain them.
Oh, so it's like giving them free reign over my machine.
Pretty much, yeah.
Gosh.
So they can write files, they can change binaries after compilation. There's all kinds of things that they can do.
Okay, so, and this isn't just theoretical, right? There have been actual incidents where a very popular JavaScript package got compromised and started stealing user credentials and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is a real thing.
Yeah, this is definitely something to be concerned about.
So, okay, so we've got MS build files and then Roslyn analyzers. What else? What other sort of things are lurking in these packages?
Even seemingly simple libraries can be a risk.
Okay.
So, just because the source code is on GitHub doesn't guarantee that the DLL you get in the package was actually built from that code.
Oh, interesting.
It could have been tampered with.
Oh, wow.
To include, malicious functions or something.
So is there any way to actually check for that? To see if there's a mismatch between the source code and the DLL?
Yeah, absolutely. You can decompile the DLL and compare it to the source code. And if the package includes debugging symbols, those PDB files, and they're properly formatted, you can actually automatically verify that the DLL matches the source code. It's an extra step, but for critical packages, it's probably worth it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's amazing how much can be hidden within just a seemingly simple package.
Yeah.
I also remember reading something about how packages can run scripts during the install or the uninstall process. Is that still something we need to worry about?
It can be. It's less of a concern for modern projects that are using the package reference format, but if you're working on older projects, especially those using the packages.config format, those scripts could still execute.
Okay.
And they're usually PowerShell scripts.
Oh, so that could be pretty powerful.
Yeah. So that's definitely something to watch out for.
So, okay. We've covered MS build manipulation, Roslyn analyzers, DLL tampering, and these sneaky installation scripts. It sounds like NuGet packages have a surprising amount of power over our systems. But before we get into the specific attack vectors, I want to ask, are these just theoretical risks, or are there actual ways attackers are exploiting these vulnerabilities in the real world?
Oh, they're definitely not just theoretical. Attackers are always coming up with new and creative ways to exploit these vulnerabilities. One that's particularly effective and unfortunately pretty common is what I call typo-squatting.
Typo-squatting, what's that?
So it preys on human error.
Okay.
So let's say you want to install the popular newtonsoft.json package.
Right.
A typo-squatter might create a package called, say, newtonsoft.json, hoping that you'll mistype the name and accidentally install their malicious package instead.
Well, that's devious. And honestly, pretty easy to fall for, especially when you're rushing or working on multiple projects or something.
It happens more often than you think. Thankfully, NuGet.org has put some protections in place. They have a system of reserved prefixes, so only authorized developers can create packages with certain names, and you'll often see a little check mark next to verified packages on NuGet.org.
Okay, that's reassuring. So there are at least some safeguards in place.
There are, but it's not foolproof.
Yeah.
Another tricky situation arises when you have private packages that happen to have the same name as a public package on NuGet.org.
Okay.
And without the proper configuration, your project might end up pulling the public package instead of your intended private one.
So even if I'm careful about typos and checking for those verification marks, there's still a chance I could accidentally install the wrong package.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
And that's where package source mapping comes in.
Okay.
It's a way to tell NuGet exactly where to look for specific packages so you always get the right version from the correct source.
So can you elaborate a bit more on how source mapping actually works? It sounds like kind of a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Sure. It's essentially a map that links package names to their corresponding sources. So, for example, you can tell NuGet that any package with the prefix my company should always be fetched from your internal server, even if a public package with the same name exists. So this prevents that accidental substitution and makes sure you're always using the intended internal packages.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So we've got typo squatting, we've got unintended substitution. Are there any other tricks up attackers' sleeves that we should be aware of?
One more that's particularly concerning is removed packages.
Okay.
So you might think that once you've thoroughly checked a package and you've installed it, you're in the clear.
Right.
But on NuGet.org, packages aren't actually deleted. They're just unlisted.
Unlisted. What does that mean?
It means that they're hidden from search results and the package dependency graph, but they still exist on the server. And here's the kicker. If an unlisted package gets updated later, your project might automatically pull in that new, potentially compromised version when you update your packages.
Oh, gosh. So even if I'm being super careful about checking packages before I install them, I could still get hit with a malicious update later down the line.
Exactly. That's why using log files is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
A log file records the exact versions of every package you're using. So when you restore your packages, you're guaranteed to get those specific versions. No surprises.
Log files. Got it. Okay, so it sounds like we're kind of moving into best practices territory now. Should we take a pause here and come back fresh to dive into how to stay safe in this wild west of package management?
That sounds like a good plan.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. So we just spent some time taking a peek behind the curtain of NuGet packages. And yeah, some of what we saw might have been a little unsettling, right? But don't worry, we're not going to leave you hanging. We're going to spend this next little bit talking about what you can actually do to stay safe in this wild world of NuGet.
I am ready to be empowered. I was getting a little nervous there for a second.
Yeah, well, knowledge is power, right? And the first step to protecting ourselves is understanding the risks. And now that we've got that part down, let's talk about some practical steps we can take to make sure those risks don't turn into real problems.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Lead the way.
All right, so the number one rule of NuGet security, and I'm going to repeat this a few times because it's that important, don't blindly trust packages.
Right. Just because it's up on NuGet.org doesn't mean it's automatically safe.
Exactly. And that's why before you even think about installing a package, the very first thing you should do is take a look inside. Use a tool like NuGet Package Explorer. It's like a digital X-ray machine for your code.
Ah, I like that. So we fire up the NuGet Package Explorer. What are we looking for exactly?
Well, start by checking out those MS build files. See if there are any commands that seem out of place, like trying to access parts of your system that they shouldn't be touching. Same goes for those Roslyn analyzers and source generators. They can be super powerful, but they can also be abused. If you're not specifically using those features in your project, it might even be a good idea to exclude them entirely.
To reduce the potential attack surface.
Exactly, like locking the doors you don't use, just to be on the safe side. Now, another thing to watch out for when you're poking around inside those package files, any kind of scripts, especially those install.ps1 or uninstall.ps1 files.
Yeah, right.
Those can actually execute arbitrary code on your machine, so you want to be extra sure they're not doing anything shady.
Gotcha. So package inspection is step one. What else can we do to keep our project safe?
Next up, lock files. Think of these as the security guards for your project. They make sure that only the exact versions of packages that you've personally approved are allowed in. It's kind of like this. You've done your due diligence, you've vetted a package, you've made sure it's safe, you install it. But then, let's say a few weeks later, that package gets updated. Maybe there's a new feature, maybe a bug fix. But maybe maybe a malicious backdoor has been slipped in.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And without a lock file, your project could just automatically pull in that updated version without you even know it. It'd be like someone sneaking in through an unlocked door.
Right, that makes sense.
A lock file prevents that by essentially freezing the versions of your packages. So when you restore your project, NuGet will use those exact versions. No surprises.
Okay, lock files. Got it. What else is on our security checklist?
Source mapping. This one's especially important if you're using any private packages, like the ones you might have hosted on your company's internal server, for example.
Right.
Source mapping is basically telling NuGet exactly where to find those specific packages, so it doesn't accidentally go and grab a public package with the same name.
It's like having a VIP list for your project. Only the approved packages get through.
I love that. That's a perfect analogy. Now let's talk about being a discerning package consumer. When you're choosing packages, don't just grab the first one that looks promising. Do a little research.
Like background checks for our packages?
You got it. See if the package author has a good reputation. See if they're following best practices. Is their code well documented? Is it maintained? You know, the whole NuGet ecosystem really relies on trust, so we want to make sure we're working with trustworthy sources.
Yeah, it's like checking the credentials of a contractor before you hire them.
Yeah.
To remodel your house. You want to make sure they know what they're doing.
Absolutely. And one last thing, especially if you're a package author yourself, think about using those reserved prefixes we talked about earlier. You know, that little check mark next to your package name on NuGet.org.
Right.
That goes a long way in building trust and preventing typo squatters from creating malicious clones of your packages.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea. So it's all about kind of raising the bar for security across the entire ecosystem, right?
Exactly. And remember, this is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix. It's about being vigilant and continuously improving our practices.
You're absolutely right. Well, this has been a really insightful look at NuGet package security. I know I've learned a ton. And hopefully our listeners have too. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the potential risks to practical ways to actually mitigate them.
It's all about making sure developers have the knowledge they need to make informed decisions and keep their projects safe.
Well said. And with that, we're going to take another quick break. But don't go away just yet. We've got some more ground to cover when we get back. Okay, so we've laid out the risks. We've looked at some of the ways attackers can exploit those risks. And now we're ready for the good stuff, right? The practical advice, the things we can actually do to make sure our projects are safe.
Absolutely. And you know, it really all comes down to this. Don't treat NuGet packages like some sort of blind trust exercise.
Right, we wouldn't just invite a complete stranger into our house, would we?
Exactly. So before you even think about installing that package, take a moment to actually peek inside, see what's going on. Tools like NuGet Package Explorer are your best friend here. Think of it like a digital X-ray for your code.
Ooh, I like that. Digital X-ray. Okay, so I've got NuGet Package Explorer open. Now what? What am I looking for?
Well, pay close attention to those MS build files. See if any of those commands seem out of place, you know, like trying to access parts of your system that they shouldn't be messing with. Same goes for the Roslyn analyzers and the source generators. They can be super useful, but they can also be abused. If you're not using those features in your project, you might even consider just excluding them entirely, just as an extra layer of protection, you know?
So like locking the doors that you don't use.
Exactly. Now, while you're in there poking around in those package files, keep a sharp eye out for any scripts, especially those install.ps1 or uninstall.ps1 files. Those little guys can execute arbitrary code on your machine, so you want to be 100% sure they're not up to anything shady.
Right. Got to make sure the scripts are on the up and up. So package inspection, that's step one. What else should we be doing to stay safe out there?
Next up, lock files. Think of these like the security guards for your project.
Okay.
They're there to make sure that only the exact versions of the packages that you've personally approved are allowed in. It's kind of like this. You've done your research, you've vetted a package, you've made sure it's legit, you install it, all good, right?
Fine.
But then, fast forward a few weeks, that package gets updated. Maybe there's a new feature, maybe a bug fix, or maybe, just maybe, a sneaky little backdoor has been slipped in there. And without a lock file, your project could just automatically pull in that update without you even realizing.
It'd be like someone just waltzing right in through an unlocked door.
Exactly. Lock files prevent that by basically freezing the versions of your packages. That way, when you restore your project, NuGet is going to use those specific versions. No surprises.
Okay, so lock files, check. What's next?
Source mapping. Now, this one's especially important if you're working with private packages, the ones you might have hosted on your company's internal server or something.
Uh-huh.
What source mapping does is it tells NuGet where to find those packages so it doesn't accidentally go and grab a public package that happens to have the same name.
So it's like having a VIP list at the door.
I love it. That's a great analogy. Now, let's talk about being a smart package shopper. Don't just grab the first thing that looks promising. Take a few minutes to do a little background check.
Background check. You mean like on the package itself?
Yeah. Look into the author, see if they've got a good reputation. Are they following best practices? Is their code well documented and maintained? The NuGet ecosystem runs on trust, so we need to make sure we're trusting the right people.
Yeah, it's like checking the references for a contractor before you let them work on your house, right? You want to make sure you're not letting just anyone in.
Yeah, exactly. And one last tip, especially for all you package authors out there, use reserved prefixes. That little check mark next to your package's name on NuGet.org can really make a difference. It builds trust, and it helps prevent typo-squatters from making those malicious copycat packages.
Okay, so it's about raising the bar for security across the entire ecosystem.
You got it. And remember, this isn't a one-and-done kind of thing. Security is an ongoing process. It's about staying vigilant and always looking for ways to improve.
Well, that's some great advice. I know I've learned a lot today. Hopefully our listeners have too. We've covered a ton of ground, from the potential risks to the practical steps we can take to avoid them.
It's all about empowering developers to make good decisions and keep the project safe.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So as we wrap things up here, I just want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Have you ever really taken the time to look inside a NuGet package before you hit that install button? If not, maybe this is the perfect time to start. Fire up that NuGet Package Explorer, put on your detective hat, and see what you find.
Yeah, you might be surprised by what you discover.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, happy coding and stay safe out there.